You're watching Study with Sudhir. I am TS Sudhir. I hope you have watched part 1 of the singing lesson, the part 1 explanation video in which we went through the first part of this story, a very fascinating story by Katherine Mansfield, who hails from New Zealand. In part 2, we'll go through the rest of the story and then discuss the themes that you should be aware of as to what's the point that Katherine Mansfield has tried to convey through this story, in which the principal character is a picture of despair and grief and sadness because of this letter that she has received from Basil, her fiance, essentially conveying to her that their engagement is off, right? That they cannot get married. The line that he says is that I feel more and more strongly that our marriage could be a mistake. And the effect of that letter that it has on Miss Meadows and the manner in which she deals with the students. So please go through explanation video number 1 before coming to this so that you can get a very elaborate understanding of this particular story, which is part of the ISC class 12 English literature syllabus. She was 30, Basil was 25. Now we just saw in the paragraph preceding it, she said people had been surprised that she had got engaged and the science teacher would not even believe it at first. And the reason was that she was 5 years older than Basil. Of course, we are talking of a very different era when these kind of difference in age where the woman was older than the man was frowned upon, not looked at very kindly, was the subject of gossip. It had been a miracle, simply a miracle to hear him say as they walked home from church that very dark night, you know, somehow or other I have got fond of you. Look at the use of words. That's not the way you convey love and affection for someone. You know, somehow or other I have got fond of you, right? I don't know how, but I have got fond of you, instead of saying that I really like you, that I really am very fond of you. So it's a very roundabout way and almost expressing doubts about how on earth could he have actually got fond of her, right? So it's as much a commentary on Miss Meadows as much as it is a commentary on Basil himself. And he had taken hold of the end of her ostrich feather boa, passes away from the listening ear. Now, whatever is coming in italics is what Miss Meadows is hearing to the lyrics of the song, right? Now, it's important that he had taken hold of her ostrich feather boa. Now, ostrich feather boa is essentially a long, thin piece of clothing made of feathers and worn around the neck, especially by women, right? Now, Miss Meadows' ostrich feather boa, which evokes basically, you know, the fact that it is of ostrich feathers. Now, ostrich is a bird which essentially buries its head inside the sand, right? It kind of, you know, it doesn't want to face the reality, like, you know, it's like an ostrich which has buried its head in the sand. So Miss Meadows also is very stubbornly committed, strongly committed to her engagement and her impending marriage, right? Even though she knows that it doesn't seem to be, there are a whole lot of red flags out there in the manner in which Basil actually speaks to her, even the manner in which he kind of proposed to her or proposed interest to her, evinced interest to her, these are all red flags. But she chooses to ignore all those warning signs and says that I will go ahead with the marriage because she is very conscious of the fact that at the age of 30, she may actually not get a match. And here in this case, she is actually getting a good looking man who is 5 years younger than her. Repeat, repeat, said Miss Meadows. More expression, girls, once more. So she's also listening to the song, but her mind is also traveling all over. Okay, it's kind of going all over the place, thinking of what all had happened in the past. Fast, too fast. The older girls were crimson, some of the younger ones began to cry. Big spots of rain blew against the windows and one could hear the willows whispering, not that I do not love you. So there is rain there, there are no leaves on those trees, and the willows were almost like whispering because they were shaking in the wind. At the same time, crimson is a rich, deep red color, almost purple in colors, because they had become, you know, they are getting very agitated and scared and frightened, right? Positively frightened is the phrase which has been used. And the little girls began to cry. But my darling, if you love me, thought Miss Meadows, I don't mind how much it is. So she's willing for a compromise. She is willing for a compromise for the sake of her marriage. Love me as little as you like. Please mark these lines because they give you a deep sense of Miss Meadows' personality and character. Love me as little as you like. So she's fine with it, but she knew that he did not love her. So even though she knew that he did not love her, she was getting into the marriage, the marital relationship, completely aware of what the future marriage would be like, right? So it was a willing compromise that she was getting into. Not to have cared enough to scratch out that word disgust so that she could not read it. Soon autumn yields unto winter drear. She would have to leave the school too. She could never face the science mistress or the girls after it got known. She would have to disappear somewhere. Passes away. The voices began to die, to fade, to whisper, to vanish. So she's very aware of the fact that society would kind of mock her, would kind of not take very kindly and make fun of her, because of which she will even have to lose her job at this particular school as a music teacher, because everyone would make fun of her once it became known that her engagement had been broken off by Basil. So just to kind of protect that, she's willing to get into a loveless marriage also, right? She's willing to get into it fully aware that he did not love her, but because of her need to conform to societal norms, she was willing to get into a loveless marriage, a very important trait and aspect and facet of her personality that you should make note of and include in your answers, right? Before this, it's like the weather are also complementing the lament song that the girls are singing. The lament of the song, the lament of Basil in that particular letter, and the lament of the weather, right? Everything coming together to create this particular atmosphere, and the visual imagery is very strong in the lines that Katherine Mansfield has written. Now, love me as little as you like also shows her assessment of herself, that she's willing to kind of settle for virtually nothing in a marriage, right? So it also shows that she does not think very highly of herself. She does not think that she's important enough that she needs to get married to a man who would actually love her, right? Suddenly the door opened. A little girl in blue walked fussily up the aisle, hanging her head, biting her lips and twisting the silver bangle on her red little wrist. She came up the steps and stood before Miss Meadows. So someone has come with a message. Well, Monica, what is it? Monica is the name of the girl. Oh, if you please, Miss Meadows, said the little girl, gasping. Miss White wants to see you in the mistress's room, right? Very well, said Miss Meadows, and she called to the girls, I shall put you on your honor to talk quietly while I am away. And they were too subdued to do anything else. Most of them were blowing their noses. Now, blowing their noses could well be as a result of them crying. Because of the tears, it leads to kind of your getting a cold. Also, the fact that it was indeed very cold weather at that point in time. Put you on honor, basically saying that I would expect all of you to stay quiet and not create a din. But they're obviously in a very subdued state of mind. One, because of the song, and more importantly, because of the unfriendly demeanor of Miss Meadows that particular morning. The corridors were silent and cold. They echoed to Miss Meadows' steps. The headmistress sat at her desk. For a moment she did not look up. She was as usual disentangling her eyeglasses, which had got caught in her lace tie. Sit down, Miss Meadows, she said very kindly, and then she picked up a pink envelope from the blotting pad. I sent for you just now because this telegram has come for you. Now, telegram is something which in the olden days would be sent, and it would always be the harbinger of bad news. You know, it brought bad news, or it could bring good news also, but something which is always a sudden kind of news, you know. Uncle dies, come immediately. That would all be sent in a telegram. Sometimes, of course, you know, baby boy born, you know, mother doing well, you know, it would be short sentences, short words, 3 to 4 words, conveying the gist of the information. This was before the era of telephones in India. Okay, of course, now telegram has become a channel, right? Now, in fact, that reminds me, we also have a telegram channel called Study with Sudhir. So please join me there. I'm still trying to figure out how to use the telegram channel. So once we get the hang of it, we'll start getting onto it also. Okay. Now, Miss White obviously thinks that it is bad news that has come in this telegram, which is why she has sent for Miss Meadows, interrupting her music class. A telegram for Miss White. Basil, he had committed suicide, decided Miss Meadows. So she thinks that he would have been so ashamed of what he had written to her that he would have actually taken the extreme step of killing himself. right? That's her first thought that occurs to her the moment she comes to know that there has a telegram which has come for her. Her hand flew out, but Miss Wyatt held the telegram back a moment. I hope it is not bad news. Her hand flew out means almost as an expression of her despair and sadness. I hope it's not bad news, she said, no, so more than kindly, and Miss Meadows tore it open, the telegram. Pay no attention to letter, must have been mad, bought hat stand today, Basil. She read, she couldn't take her eyes off the telegram. So that was a telegram written by Basil saying that pay no attention to the letter that I had sent. I must have been mad to write that letter, bought hat stand today. So again, talking about himself. He does not even apologize for what he had written. He does not express any kind of regret for what he had written. He just says, ignore that letter. I must have been crazy to have written that letter, and this is what I bought. You know, another one which kind of conveys the kind of personality that he is. I do hope it's nothing very serious, said Mr. Wyatt, leaning forward. Oh no, thank you, Miss Wyatt, blushed Miss Meadows. It's nothing bad at all. And it is, she gave an apologetic little laugh. It's from her fiancé saying that there was a pause. I see, said Miss Wyatt, and another pause. Then you have 15 minutes more of your class, Miss Meadows, haven't you? So the headmistress is not very amused by the fact that it was not bad news, because telegram was supposed to be the harbinger of bad news. So the fact that a fiancé had just sent just like that something in a telegram is not amusing the headmistress. Yes, Miss Wyatt, she got up, she half ran towards the door. Oh, just 1 minute, Miss Meadows, said Miss Wyatt. I must say, I don't approve of my teachers having telegrams sent to them in school hours unless in case of very bad news. It's almost like she's disappointed that it was not bad news, such as death. Explained Miss Wyatt, or on a very serious accident or something to that effect. Good news, Miss Meadows, will always keep you know. So, good news is not something which you need to send via a telegram. Now, half ran to the door conveys a sense of energy. So, see the effect of that letter, even though it's not expressing regret, even though it's not an apology, even though it does not clarify what he had written actually in the letter, except to say that I must have been mad to write that kind of a letter, it kind of fills her with a new kind of energy. So, half ran is a visual symbolism of the energy that now Miss Meadows has got, right? And it's written in a very matter of fact kind of tone. The fact that he sent the telegram shows that he wanted her not to get affected by the letter that he had sent before. So, while it may show a sense of concern, the fact that he does not apologize for it, the fact that he does not regret having written that letter, written that kind of a letter in which he had used a word like disgust, shows that he does not care beyond a point. He cares to an extent, but he does not care beyond a point. Now, the irony of this whole telegram and the letter is that the bad news had actually come via the letter, and it is the telegram which is actually bringing good news. So, you see the irony of the telegram as a means of communication, the way Miss Wyatt actually interprets it. On the wings of hope, of love, of joy, Miss Meadows sped back to the music hall, up the aisle, up the steps, over to the piano. So, now there is an energy, and look at the words, wings of hope, of love and of joy, and look at the words which had been used right in the first paragraph, of cold sharp despair. Again, these two phrases you need to know, of cold sharp despair now being replaced by wings of hope, of love and of joy. Page 32, the page 14 has now been replaced with page 32. Page 32, Mary, she said, page 32, and picking up the yellow chrysanthemum, she held it to her lips to hide her smile. Then she turned to the girls, wrapped with her baton. Page 32, girls, page 32. So, 32 in that sense is reflective, is symbolic of her newfound energy and happiness. We come here today with flowers overladen, with baskets of fruit and ribbons to boot, to congratulate. Stop, stop, cried Miss Meadows. This is awful. This is dreadful. And she beamed at her girls. What's the matter with you all? Think, girls, think of what you are singing. Use your imagination. With flowers overladen, baskets of fruit and ribbons to boot, and congratulate. Miss Meadows broke off. Don't look so doleful, as in don't look so sad. So now that she's in a happy mood, she expects all her girl students also to be equally happy. It ought to sound warm, joyful, eager. Congratulate once more, quickly, all together, now then. And this time Miss Meadows' voice sounded over all the other voices, full, deep, glowing with expression. So, you see the complete change that has occurred in Miss Meadows' voice, and she expects her girls also to forget the lament and talk about the baskets and fruits and ribbons to boot, to congratulate and talk of the flowers overladen, right? So the lyrics are positive, they're magical, they're exuberant, they're happy, right? So that's as far as the story is concerned. Let's do a quick critical analysis for you to understand and also to take down notes for you to understand and write in your, include in your answers. A lot of phrases from this story you will need to mark and remember in order to quote from the story. That will really help you get better marks. Now, it's very obvious that Miss Meadows is very bothered about what others think of her, right? It's kind of very obvious through the entire story, and she's obviously very concerned about the fact that how would others judge the news of her breakup, the breakup of her engagement, because she's obviously very conscious of her age, the fact that she's 30 and who was getting married to a 25-year-old person, and now she would be once again single at 30. And as a result of this mood of unhappiness and despair, she's obviously not pleasant with her students, and they end up weeping in class. Now, despair with which the story begins, right, is pretty much the dominant. It's also in a sense the very defining emotion in this particular story. The cold, sharp despair that is spoken of, its effect is very deep because it's buried deep in her heart like a wicked knife. So it's a use of very sharp and very blunt imagery. But there is also more in the story which kind of conveys a very sharp and severe sense of despair in the music teacher Miss Meadows, because she is described as bleeding to death because her heart is pierced by Basil's letter, and she is so affected by what he had actually written the letter, the language used, the contents of the letter, that she asks her students to sing the song of lament instead of the singing the song of happiness on page 32. So in that sense, there is no happiness. Fast fade the roses of pleasure is what the lyrics are saying. The element of the weather is another important aspect of this particular story, because it's late autumn slipping into winter, so it's already very cold, and the willow trees no longer have their leaves, and the wind is blowing against the windows, also the rain. So in that sense, the entire visual imagery is that of no cheer. There is no green, it's all very grey out there outside. She's also very absorbed in her own sorrow, right? Even though she's a teacher who's supposed to take care of her children while she's at school, she's very absorbed in her sorrow that she ends up translating and transferring rather her entire unhappiness and despair, sense of despair, to her students, who obviously react with shock and end up with tears in their eyes. She ignores her favorite student Mary's gracious gesture of handing over the yellow chrysanthemum to her. She is not very polite with the kind of instructions she gives during the music rehearsals, and as a result, as I said, she leaves many of the students in tears, and that does not reflect very well on her personality in general. Now, the way Basil treats Miss Meadows, also you would get an idea that it does not bode very well for the future. As I said, there are a whole lot of red flags that are very clearly visible to the reader. I'm sure you noticed it, and I'm sure even Miss Meadows notices it, but she ignores it for the sake of what the society will actually think for her. Because the moment she actually gets the telegram, she ignores and forgets what all harsh things were written in that letter from Basil. The harshness of the letter she completely forgets. Also forgets the fact that Basil is actually very inconsiderate, and it's very evident that he does not love her. Even though he has taken a U-turn from that letter to this telegram, the fact that he does not love her and he is more obsessed with himself is very obvious both through the letter as well as this telegram, right? Also, in a sense, the author is kind of conveying that he could well be gay, right? That is a sense that you get through this entire story, and perhaps that's the reason why he says that it would be impossible for me to love any woman. So that's the kind of a hint that is being given out here, that he may well be gay, and that's the reason why he says that it is I love you as much as it is possible for me to love any woman. But truth to tell, I've come to the conclusion that I am not a marrying man, right? I am not a marrying man. Now, The telegram also, as I explained earlier, does not quite explain his conduct, why he actually wrote what he wrote in that letter that he had sent to Basil, and he does not even apologize for the anguish that the letter created as far as Miss Meadows was concerned. He changes his decision immediately, but even while changing his decision, he is talking about his hat stand, right? It kind of leaves you with a feeling that Miss Meadows' marital happiness could well be short-lived because of the kind of character and personality of Basil. Also the very compromising quality of Miss Meadows, that she knows that it won't be a very happy marriage, that she knows it for a fact that, you know, she knew that he did not love her, but despite which she's willing to go ahead with that match, with the marriage. So in that sense, it's also a very unequal kind of relationship. He has this particular position, she has a position that despite no love, she wants to get into this marital relationship, and that's because of societal pressure. She feels embarrassed about being single at 30, while Basil, who seems to think that, you know, it was impossible for him to love any woman, also wants to get into this facade of a marriage to kind of make it appear to society that he's kind of normal, right? So a loveless marriage seems okay to both Basil as well as Miss Meadows. Now, even earlier when he had proposed to Miss Meadows, he had said that he finds it very surprising that he has actually got fond of her, right? It actually comes as a surprise to her. So these are all indications that given by Katherine Mansfield that he may well be a gay man. Also, when he's touching, he doesn't touch Miss Meadows, he actually touches her ostrich feather boa. It also kind of conveys a lack of any kind of sensual connection between the two characters. That's what one of the critics had also pointed out. So those are some of the points that you would kind of know, we need to know about as far as this story is concerned. As far as the poems are, as far as the yellow flowers are concerned, the yellow chrysanthemum is concerned, now that's a symbol of joy, and the fact that Mary, a young girl, is giving also kind of adds to the fact that it is a symbol of joy, and she wants Miss Meadows to feel joyful and happy as a result of receiving that flower. So it's almost like a ritual which would happen almost on a daily basis for the past term and a half. So it kind of conveys excitement, but as far as Miss Meadows is concerned, in that frame of mind, it is the fall which is kind of having more of an effect on her, the late autumn, the effect of the letter that she had received. So in that sense, the yellow flowers also she sees as a symbol of the problems that she is facing in her life, and that's the reason she kind of, in a sense, rejects the flower. She does not react to the happiness that she would normally get as a result of receiving that flower. She thinks life has, in a sense, passed her way, in a sense that she is in the autumn of her life at the age of 30, and only when the fiancé returns to her, she kind of renews her engagement with the yellow chrysanthemum. So there is also the correlation of the yellow chrysanthemum, her own problems, and Basil's letter and telegram that follows, as a result of which she reacts differently to the same yellow chrysanthemum. So I hope you have understood the analysis of the singing lesson by Katherine Mansfield. Any problems, any doubts, please write in the comment section. We will try to address that. But it's an interesting story. It's a short story, but a story that is rich with a lot of meaning, a lot of layering, which you should be aware of. Thank you very much for watching.